Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second. It makes a massive difference in how it performs in the algorithm, so it's much appreciated. Also check us out over on audio platforms if you want to enjoy this as an audio only experience. This is available over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So today's episode is going to be a long one because I decided to go about watching every single NBA team's first game. This took a little bit longer than I thought it would, but I finally got here and I have a take for every single team. I'm going to do a little bit of breaking down of the actual game that happened in some bits and some speculation. I just want to get some shit off about every team based on the first game that I saw, so if you will indulge me, let's talk about every NBA team's first game. I wrote these in the order of which games I watched. So first, I watched Boston versus New York as everybody else did. Boston won 132-109. Starting with the New York Knicks, first of all, I do not feel like Cat was used in screen action nearly enough. Lots of post-ups, lots of kind of meandering away from the ball. Deuce McBride was phenomenal. Pull-ups, step-backs, three-pointers, mid-range, and one step-back three-pointers. Just every kind of bucket he was putting up was going in this game. He finished with 22 points on 8 for 10 shooting. Mikal Bridges' jumper looked a little bit busted in the first half, but it looked completely fine in the second and has looked good subsequently, so this is probably a nothing burger, but you gotta make a story out of something during the early stages of the season, so that's what everybody decided to run with. I felt that Mikal and OG were extremely underwhelming on the defensive end of the floor, unfortunately. A lot of times Cat was left on an island because both of those guys were just not doing their job properly. The lack of offensive rebounding was very apparent for them, and they lost that battle when that was a huge part of their identity last year. And unfortunately, their backup center, Jericho Sims, really does not look like an NBA rotational piece, and that is a big concern for you given Mitchell Robinson's tendency to get hurt. And Cat isn't exactly not injury prone himself, so yeah, Jericho Sims did not look great. He got fucking destroyed by Luke Cornett on a incredibly telegraphed play. There's poor communication on both ends of the floor, really no chemistry. Nobody really seemed like they knew what they were doing. I think they'll be fine overall. Playing Boston at home after they just raised their banner and they're literally the repeating champions and they could not have a better chemistry. By contrast to you, who now have two different starters in this roster that very fundamentally change your playstyle, that's a lot to adapt to, and it's in literally the most pressured environment you could possibly have, so I completely understand why they folded this game. First thing I really liked about Boston is they had a really smart defensive strategy by putting Drew Holiday on Karl-Anthony Towns on that initial matchup. If Cat would actually try to post out to take advantage of that, usually Al Horford would be able to bring some help defense, or a wing would swat at the ball to make it not too easy for him. But otherwise, it meant that in screen action, if they switch that screen, which they'd really have no incentive not to, it would be Drew Holiday switching onto Jalen Brunson rather than Al Horford. Al Horford is free food for Jalen Brunson. Drew Holiday very much is not. So there was some criticism for Cat for not abusing that mismatch, but frankly, that's not taking team defensive scheme into account. Their ability to generate three-point attempts is just fucking ridiculous. Like, the amount of wide open shots they were consistently getting, a lot of it coming off of double teams at the top of the key from Tatum. Tatum throws a pass either to an open shooter or to somebody who finds an open shooter. On repeat, hey, look, we found ourselves another wide open three. They obviously came 1-3 short of the record. I think they went like 0 for 13 after they tied Milwaukee's record for 29 made threes. Honestly, the funniest outcome was that they wouldn't hit these. Luckily, it doesn't sour the overall feeling of that stretch just because it was mostly the scrubs who were missing these shots, but it would have been nice to break the record. At one point, they were up 23 points on the Knicks, despite the fact that the Knicks were shooting 60% from the field. The Celtics just look like a bunch of robots playing basketball, and they're all vaguely the same robot. They can all shoot 40% on a bunch of threes, off the dribble, off the catch, does not matter. They can all pass really, really well. They can all defend really, really well. They can all attack a closeout really, really well. And all of these players play for each other, so if everyone's super skilled and everyone's working to get the best shot possible, you're gonna pretty consistently get really good shots. Oh, I forgot to mention this in the intro. I also am doing a grade of entertainment for the game as a whole, just purely how enjoyable were the first 15 NBA games. It's actually 17 in here because of scheduling stuff, but we'll worry about that later. For this game, I gave it a B-. I think because it's a blowout, you really can't give it any higher than that. I can't label it as a super entertaining game, but seeing Cat and Mikal in these new jerseys was really interesting. It's a spectacle to see Boston shoot the way they do, also given the context of the championship banner being risen. So it is what it is. Miles McBride also, he was going off. I enjoyed that. There was stuff to enjoy about this game, but it definitely was a pretty underwhelming season debut. The next game we have is the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Los Angeles Lakers, where Minnesota would score 103 points and LA would score 110, getting a victory in their home game. First things first for the Lakers, the Bronny James thing happened. I'm not going to add more to it. You've probably already heard enough yapping about it. I really liked LA's energy. I liked their creativity on the offensive end of the floor. I liked how Anthony Davis was the focal point of the offense. I liked that despite the fact there is going to be more of a three-point shooting philosophy with this Lakers team, it also wasn't like they were forcing three-pointers, and they certainly were not living or dying by them as they shot like 5 for 30-something in this game. They still managed to win even when the three wasn't working, which says a lot about the versatility of the offense. Rui Hachimura also had a more active role in the offense, which I appreciated because to me, he's such an effective play finisher and so capable of attacking closeouts. They got a lot of offensive rebounds and have continued to do that, as that was a large part of their identity for that 2020 championship team, and they have since wavered from that as they were one of the worst offensive rebounding teams in the league last year. JJ Redick has multiple times on his podcast suggested that offensive rebounding was a super underrated thing in the NBA, specifically because of how it generates open three-point looks, so I can't say I'm surprised that he thought that was the right move for them. JJ seemed kind of unsure of his rotation beyond the starters. Like, there were 4 different players off of the bench who played anywhere from 11 to 17 minutes, and they were in a variety of contexts. We actually saw Jackson Hayes at the 5 alongside Anthony Davis at the 4 a good bit, and Jackson Hayes actually played really well in a limited amount of minutes because while that guy does not have a lot going for his game, one thing he can do is be a play finisher, and one thing he can do is grab offensive rebounds, and he did both of those really, really effectively. Dalton Knecht hit a 3 at the top of the key, like as soon as he subbed in, so that's a positive side, good sign, good way to start your NBA career. He also made a really nice pass to a cutting Gabe Vincent. D'Lo and Austin Reeves went a combined 0 for 12 from 3, so you can count on that not fucking happening again. Like, I'm not saying these two aren't prone to combine for a stinker of a performance, but 0 for 12 is an extreme that's just like, yeah, that's not going to be something you consistently run into. LeBron had a fairly minimal amount of influence on the offensive end of the floor for the Lakers, but frankly, I think that is the right move. It's a move that I've been calling for them to make for years and years and years. I guess it literally took the guy turning 40 and having his son in the league for them to finally come to that conclusion. He didn't shoot the ball very well, but he closed really strong. Him and AD closed the fourth quarter really well. I like that at this stage of his career, they're just letting this old man be a play finisher instead of trying to run the entire offense through him. It's taxing over the course of a season. I liked a lot what I saw from their offense. And frankly, that is not something that I can say about this Lakers team and have said since 2020. All right, the Minnesota Timberwolves. First things first, can't say I'm surprised Julius Randle looked awkward. I feel like he's going to look a little bit awkward regardless, but especially in your first game after being traded there unexpectedly, only makes sense. Just not aggressive enough, looking for his own shot, didn't really space the floor super well. He did make some good short roll passes and stuff like that, which was a nice contrast to what Karl Anthony Towns is as a decision maker. He also had a couple of defensive lapses where he just completely fell asleep, one of which got Rui Hachimura a wide open dunk back door. When the trade of that happened there, so many people were knocking Cat's defense in their description of that as though Julius Randle was like some defensive dynamo. But seeing him step in there and just look completely lost on that end of the floor is really no surprise to me. The offense as a whole for Minnesota was super stagnant. Anthony Edwards has decided to increase his three-point shooting volume, and beyond the days of just this first game, he has continued to take like 15 three-pointers a game. Frankly, I don't know if Anthony Edwards has ever been meant to be that caliber of shooter, because that is a volume that is like James Harden, Damian Lillard, Stephen Curry tier, and I just don't know that Ant is meant to be that tier of shooter. He very clearly feels differently. I would rather him continue to operate in the mid-range game purely because it's sexier. Basketball stuff aside, I just don't like that he is like, I gotta shoot all the threes in the world. I would dial it back a little bit. Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert, and Julius Randle all on the floor at the same time resulted in rough spacing. Who could have seen that coming? Unfortunately, Mike Conley had a bad shooting night. He looked quite a bit old in this one. Great dude, though. Shout out to him. Dante DiVincenzo, I felt, made good decisions, even though he did not hit his shots, going 2 for 7. I don't know. I hate to be a bummer, but this Cat trade, though Cat was far from one of my favorite things about the Minnesota Timberwolves, something about it just really sucked the energy out of this team for me, and I'm just not as excited about them as I was last year. As a result, I am giving this game a C+ for entertainment. Not the best, even though it was a close game. One of these teams just felt like they were asleep the whole time. Next, we have the Charlotte Hornets versus the Houston Rockets, with Houston losing 105 to Charlotte's 110. No Mark Williams for the Charlotte Hornets, but we did have Nick Richards at the starting 5, and he did a decent job holding down the fort, even though Alperen Şengün definitely had his way with him in the first half. LaMelo started this game horribly offensively, as did most of Charlotte, as they shot 36% at halftime, but he and the Hornets had a lot of momentum gained as the game went along. They closed really strong. He specifically closed really strong and making some clutch plays down the stretch. He shot a crazy deep three-pointer and got his own offensive rebound. One of the, if you're chasing after your own board, one of the furthest I've seen someone, most ground I've seen someone cover getting their own rebound. But he put that one back up, also hit another deep three, got a layup. He was awesome. Trey Mann rocking a bold look, this 2000s Iverson-esque and one look, but dude, it's given him proper aura points because he had 24 points on 16 shots, including 9 points in the fourth quarter, combining with the 12 points that LaMelo Ball had. In general, it was really just those two cooking in the fourth that allowed them to win this game, as Houston kind of let it slip away. So what I do think for Houston, well, Jalen Green was chucking threes just like Anthony Edwards. He put up 15 attempts. He overall had a 55.6% true shooting, which is just a little bit below league average just because he was only taking threes and he got a couple of free throws. Amen Thompson looked fucking awesome, and frankly, I feel like I was sleeping on him last year. Being used as a screener and a cutter, it's almost like they're using him like a center almost at points. He's incredibly creative around the rim, so much touch, and if I were going to pop off a hot take for the Rockets right here, he might be their most exciting young player, and frankly, it seems like him having this broken-ass jump shot was like the world's way of humbling him, because otherwise, I would argue the guy has a star-level impact in every other facet of the game. Star-level playmaking, star-level slashing, star-level rim running, star-level defense, at least at points. He can make some very loud plays. I don't think he's quite as solid as his brother is, but dude's just fucking phenomenal. Alperen Şengün hasn't skipped a beat. He also hit a couple of three-pointers, so that's cool. Fred VanVleet was awful. He went 4 for 18. Their depth was very apparent. I wouldn't be surprised at all if some of their rotations looked dramatically different by the end of the year. Some dudes that are on that bench could potentially earn some starting jobs. Jabari Smith Jr. was unfortunately nowhere to be found on the offensive end of the floor. Their defense was pretty great. They kept Charlotte out of the paint really well. The perimeter players also didn't feel too comfortable. They were pretty regularly getting bumped off of their spots. Not that it stopped LaMelo or Trey Mann from having good performances, because they did. Their offense was pretty basic, play through your star, a couple of Jalen Green Şengün duo moments, but it was fine. It got the job done. Not an impressive offensive scheme from what I could get, but good. They did choke away a rather big lead, though. Some poor late-game execution, and that can be the difference between whether or not you make the playoffs or not in the Western Conference. Jalen Green, now he was super clutch in that fourth. He scored 10 points on 4 for 6 shooting. It was pretty much everybody, including Alperen Şengün especially, who just really did not keep up the momentum they had from the first 3 quarters going into that one. Entertainment-wise, I would actually give this an A-. I was really excited to watch this game. This was the game I chose to watch it was the first game I watched on day 2 of the NBA season. Really enjoyed both of these teams, especially the Rockets, who I'm typically pretty indifferent to. Amen has really caught my attention. Moving on to the Detroit Pistons versus the Indiana Pacers, with Indiana winning 115 to 109 in the case of Detroit. For them, they looked like an NBA team. I know you don't want to go in too positive on a loss here, but in the case of the Pistons, we got a very low fucking bar to clear. Great scoring distribution. Ivy, Tobias, Tim Hardaway Jr., Duren, and Beasley all got between 13 and 17 points. There is a clear hierarchy of Cade Cunningham at number 1, and then you can kind of just give the ball to whoever is open after that. There's not really some clear, oh, Tobias Harris needs X amount of shots, Jalen Duren needs X amount of shots. No, whoever's open, whoever the offense gets it to, that's fine. After Cade is the engine, of course. Cade looked like him in the third quarter. His efficiency for the game overall was not great, but he had a moment in that quarter where it was like, oh, he's that fucking dude, like capital H him, and looks like he's in for a breakout year. Just looked straight up unguardable, hit a bunch of post fadeaways, which I really enjoyed. Duren was fantastically efficient. He had a 98% true shooting percentage. If Tim Hardaway Jr. averaged a few less points per game last year, I honestly feel like he could be like an old man most improved player candidate. I could see him averaging like 17 to 18 points a game on this team just because he gets a lot of open opportunities. Disappointing lack of Fontecchio. I know you have to develop Ron Holland, and he deserves some opportunity there, but honestly, I want to see Detroit try and be a little bit competitive. And as of right now, I feel like playing Ron Holland over Fontecchio is a long-term development decision, not an actually good basketball decision. For right now, I would probably let Ron get a little bit of development in the G League, or at the very least, I would just get a little bit more Fontecchio in there one way or the other. Ivy had some good moments slashing to the rim in this one, but his jumper looked very real in the preseason, and it didn't look very real here. Specifically, did not get any separation on his shots, where he was operating with a lot of pretty open space in that preseason. They actually had a lead at one point and they blew it, but I'm honestly not too mad at them for it. This is a team that was fucking dog shit last season. Their main issue was also fouling Benedict Mathurin. That just kept happening, which wasn't an issue that I expect to repeat itself too much. I don't think they have a huge fouling issue. It's just kind of the way that this game went. The fact that they looked better than the team that made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year for a majority of the game is overall a huge victory on its own by contrast to where the Pistons were last year. Like I said, they're a real NBA team right now. Unfortunate news for the Indiana Pacers. After having an actually decent start, unfortunately, James Wiseman tore his Achilles, so that fucking sucks. Andrew Nembhard had a lot of really strong defensive possessions on Cade Cunningham for 3 out of the 4 quarters. On offense, he distributed the ball well, but he couldn't really get his own shot going. Really strong Miles Turner game, hit some gutsy threes. Scored 16 points in the third quarter, hitting 3 3-pointers, so that's awesome. This was a really strong Benedict Mathurin game. I am not the biggest fan of him, just because I'm not the biggest fan of his archetype of player. Him getting to the line is the reason that the Pacers ultimately won in that fourth quarter, so kudos to him for that. Undeniably a really good game. Tyrese was dreadful. Like, just completely the encapsulation of the idea of being fucking awful. Just so many awful sequences. One where he shot 3 3-pointers on the same possession, each from further and further away, and each miss uglier and uglier. And then, of course, this is the thing that's brutal for Detroit Pistons fans. The 1 3 he makes of the game is essentially the dagger to end the game. So look, if you were going to make any of them, that's the one to make, but like, hey, maybe make some more of them so you don't need to be hitting a dagger against the Pistons in the final minute of the game. TJ McConnell was insanely efficient. He went 7 for 8 and scored 14 points, doing so in 15 minutes of action. So high levels of production for the amount of time he got. Pascal Siakam was quietly excellent. I honestly expect like a steady, consistent level of production for him, to the point where I'm like, yep, Pascal Siakam checked the box. That's another Pascal Siakam game. He's one of those dudes that I just kind of passively accept that they're just good. There's nothing more to add to it. They looked like the Pacers. Not much to add. They're basically the same team as last year. Overall, for entertainment, I gave this game a B+, probably closer to an A- than a B. There were just some moments where both teams played kind of ugly at points, and that was not enjoyable, but it was nice to see the Detroit Pistons look like a basketball team. Next, we have the Chicago Bulls versus the New Orleans Pelicans, with Chicago losing 111 to 123. My first notes for my Chicago Bulls: oh boy, here we go again. We're back in Tank Town. Lonzo returning. That was cool. He hit a right wing catch and shoot three-pointer off movement. That was his first bucket in over 1,000 days in an official NBA game. Zach LaVine, in terms of shooting the ball, was fucking scorching in this game. He went 10 for 17, I think 5 for 5 or 5 for 6 maybe from 3. Now, as for how his distribution went, well, he had twice as many turnovers as assists, but I will give him the credit of, hey, scoring is his thing. He did that super well. In general, the Bulls in this game were really sloppy with turnovers, which is not indicative of how they were last year with some dramatically different personnel. And they actually had the third most turnovers of any team in their first game of the season, finishing with 21 turnovers, which is not great. You want to guess who had the worst plus minus on this team? You want to guess who had the worst game for the Chicago Bulls? You want to guess who started over Ayo Dosunmu, who last year proved that he was one of the better starting guards in the NBA, a 15-point-per-game all-defense caliber guy who also is a phenomenal decision-maker, even though he's not a high-volume passer? Yeah, that guy got benched for Josh Giddey, and then Josh Giddey was the worst player on the entire basketball court. Get ready for me to shit on him all year. The only thing I'm remotely okay with for Giddey is that at the very least, this fucking Disney Surfer movie extra can tank this season effectively for us. Buzelis only played 5 minutes. Fuck that. You need to develop him. I hate that. Play him more. Play your lottery pick, your ass. Jalen Smith had some cool moments offensively. He's one of the most prolific in terms of like, oh, I'm getting 12 minutes in this game, I'm getting double-digit points in those 12 minutes. It's actually kind of ridiculous how productive he is in such short amount of time. It's unfortunate that his defense is as bad as it is, because otherwise he'd be easily a starting player, because he's got a starting caliber offensive game, I'll tell you that much. Patrick Williams played bad and really was not looking for his own shot, which is disappointing because we've been knocking him for not taking those shots when there were more dudes around him. Now there are less dudes around him and he is still not taking those shots, so what are the fucking excuses? Offensively, they were a disaster, and on the defensive end of the floor, they had no coordination at all and not even an ounce of an interior presence. New Orleans as a whole shot 84% on the rim. There was just so many wide open layups in the half-court set. They did briefly run a zone for like 2 seconds, similar to what the Lakers did actually. They very briefly ran a zone in their debut game, but just like the Lakers, they did it for like 2 possessions before they gave it up. Moving on to the New Orleans Pelicans. Daniel Tice ended up starting at the 5. There was no Zion in this game, unfortunately. Their backup 5 rookie, Yves Missy, was phenomenal. He scored 12 points, grabbed 7 rebounds, and got 3 blocks in 23 minutes. He caught a couple of lobs and protected the rim super well. CJ and Brandon Ingram had a couple of bad shots, but honestly, that's kind of the entirety of their offense when there is no Zion, is just, hey, can you guys shoot the ball a bunch and hopefully it works out? There were some moments where BI was looking for his threes a little bit more aggressively, which is nice to see. Emphasized some gutsy three-point shots in there. Only got 5 attempts up in the game, but like a couple of them were like shots that he would pass up normally. Their offense, like Chicago's, very basic. As I mentioned, when Zion's not there, the offense just essentially becomes, all right, CJ and Brandon Ingram, see how many pull-up jump shots you can get. It's kind of hard to judge the Pelicans here. They got a solid win against a bad team without their best player. They wouldn't have beat most teams with this performance, but they were lucky enough to play the Chicago Bulls. They had no Zion, but I can't really expect him to look amazing. I also should add DeJounte Murray, another unfortunate injury, fractured his hand, got 10 assists to just 1 turnover. So he distributed the ball really well and had some good defensive moments, but apparently he's going to be out for a while. The DeJounte thing really sucks, man. It seems like you can never get a real idea of what the New Orleans Pelicans are going to look like. I'm giving this game a D+ for entertainment. The no Zion, I hate watching the Pelicans without Zion. Their offense is just so bland under those circumstances. So I had little to actually watch this game for, other than to confirm that this is going to be a really long year watching Josh Giddey play starting point guard for my team. Then we have the Phoenix Suns versus the Los Angeles Clippers, with Phoenix winning 116-113. Devin Booker and Kevin Durant were really not looking for their shots that aggressively, and when they were taking shots, they were taking 3-pointers. That is an improvement. The fact that they were able to coast so much offensively and that they put an emphasis on increasing their 3-point volume. Clearly, there is an actual system in place for this offense rather than just dudes taking turns isolating, and honestly, that's about as good as news as the Suns could conceivably get, given that you weren't going to get some dramatically good news in terms of your rotation and shit, because you have an old-ass roster and you're probably not going to luck your way into a bunch of good players, although maybe you have with Ryan Dunn. Ultimately, internal improvement and a new scheme is the only thing that has any hope at all of saving this team, and it looks like Mike Budenholzer has implemented it. The defense was pretty damn good. Kevin Durant had a couple of moments as a rim protector, and who I previously mentioned, Ryan Dunn, looks like he is going to be a troubling perimeter defender for a lot of star players around the league. It's just a matter of whether or not his threes hit. Speaking of threes, Nurkic is shooting threes now. It seems like Budenholzer wants him to be like the Brook Lopez of this team. I don't know about that one. I'll say overall, though, I think they should be a lot better this year. And a big thing is that they were down 7 points midway through the fourth quarter. Now, remember, last year, the Phoenix Suns were the worst fourth quarter offense in the entire league. So down 7 halfway through, that might as well be a loss at that point for last year's Suns. I don't know how to look up this stat specifically, but I'm willing to bet you games where they are down by that much in the final 6 minutes of the fourth last year, they lost those fucking games. This one, they sent into overtime, and they executed well in overtime. As a whole, they took 38 three-pointers. They averaged 32.6 a game last year. I guess that's probably in line with the overtime, but seems like there's more of an emphasis, and that both Durant and Booker are like, okay, let's turn a few more of these middies into threes. For the Los Angeles Clippers, I was actually surprised by LA's performance because they looked pretty fucking good. We got a vintage James Harden performance, which is to say that he put up 29, 12, and 8 with kind of gross efficiency when you look at the field goal and three-point percentage, but his actual true shooting was decent because, of course, he got to the free throw line and he shot a lot of threes. To be honest, his box score is a lot worse than his performance felt, which for James Harden, you can't always say that. Sometimes it feels like he's bricking every shot that he's taking, and he is. In the third quarter, he had 16 points and could not miss from mid-range. It felt like it was just a free 2 points every time he set up that mid-range shot. He actually hangs in the air on it for a while, which is interesting. The offense looked surprisingly good with him on the bench, however. When Phoenix was down 7 halfway through the fourth, that lead was accumulated by the Clippers without James Harden. That was Zubac, that was Terrence Mann, and it was especially Amir Coffey, who had 10 points on 4 for 4 shooting in that fourth quarter, 2 3-pointers and 2 post fadeaways. One of those 3-pointers was like a crazy deep 3 to beat the shot clock. So shout out to Amir Coffey for that, because that probably won them, or that's the reason that they went into overtime to begin with. They ended up losing anyways. This is going to be a bleak season for LA, but potentially like a James Harden reclamation project could at least be enough to make them interesting. So for the entertainment standpoint, I'll go ahead and give this a B+. Phoenix's offense was a lot more fun to watch than it was last year, and seeing Harden carry an offense to that degree, again, it was kind of nostalgic and interesting, even if it could potentially be sad. Next, we have the Toronto Raptors and the Cleveland Cavaliers, with the Cavs winning 136-106. First, starting off with the Cavs, Evan Mobley was fucking fantastic on offense. I can't emphasize how much he looked like a completely different player. Attacking off with a dribble, hitting 3-pointers, being super decisive, attacking mismatches, dribbling a lot, like sometimes taking the ball full court all the way on his own, like a bunch of different instances where he just made his defender look silly, like too slow, not coordinated enough to keep up with his moves. Like, man, he might be a front runner for most improved player in my mind, literally just off of that game alone, because it wasn't just a matter of him having a good game. It was about how he did it and about how it was clearly a focal point for the Cavaliers. He also had Scotty Barnes in a fucking straitjacket, dude. Like, dude was locked up to a degree that was actually hard to watch at points. Darius Garland looked pretty rough, unfortunately. He's looking to have a bounce-back season. Doesn't necessarily have to start in game 1. Karis LeVert was insane off of the bench. He went 8 for 9 from the field, and he went on a 15-point run without a miss in the third quarter, going 6 for 6. Ty Jerome, also super efficient, going 6 for 7. Hit some tough floaters through traffic, threw a couple of good passes, connected on a lob to Jared Allen. I believe he's had a couple of good games since, so maybe Ty Jerome is one of the better backup point guards in the league all of a sudden. For the Toronto Raptors, there was no RJ. Honestly, for a rebuilding team, there's not a lot here that I'm actually that interested in. Scotty Barnes had a horrible game. There's a lot of people who have been projecting a scoring leap from him. I know there was a Bleacher Report article that projected him to join the 25-8 under 25 club, which was like this very specific stat that only like Luka and some other ridiculous players have achieved. I don't really think he's the scoring volume type for that. He got a couple of open jump shots that were like comically open that just did not go in. I don't think his jumper is broken, but I do think that his jumper is never going to be top tier 25 point per game, really efficient scorer good. I think he's primarily going to be a rim runner who plays well as a secondary. Grady Dick had a lot of impressive plays, and not just purely as a shooter. Mid-range pull-up on the baseline. Also did a filthy in-air layup reverse on the baseline. Got a lot of height on it. Sneaky athletic, that Dick is. He also got a chase down block on Darius Garland. Also Jamal Shed, who is their backup, from what I got, combo guard, because he played a little bit alongside other point guards as well. So I do think he's probably playing both, but Jamal Shed had a couple of moments offensively, couple floaters, couple three-pointers. Not a great game. Not a great one to glean a lot of what the season will look like for either of these teams other than the Mobley thing, because this was a uniquely hellish matchup for Toronto and a very weak opponent for Cleveland. So on the entertainment front, I would give it a D+. Kind of ugly basketball besides for the Mobley Masterclass. That's really all I'm going to remember from this one. The Oklahoma City Thunder absolutely beat the dog water out of the Denver Nuggets 102-87. Jamal Murray might as well have been Jordan Crawford. All right, the dude is kind of awful sometimes. There is something wrong with him, and he might have genuinely declined for real at a really weird age to decline at that. Christian Brown did a really good job attacking closeouts. He had a lot of very athletic drives where, once again, some sneaky athleticism from that Christian Brown. I don't know what it is about him that makes that athleticism so sneaky, but really aggressive on the break. But when it came to his three-point shooting, he went 0 for 3, and a bunch of these were just, actually all of them were just as open gets. Practice shots, none of them went in. One of them was like a fucking dime from Jokic, like cross court all the way in the corner. I'm on the right block, or I guess it'd be the left block, throws it over to the right corner. This is fucking with my perspective. I have a horrible sense of direction. My point being, great pass from Jokic, Christian Brown bricks it, and you kind of felt like that's exactly what was going to happen. Same goes for Russ. Every time he took a three, he went 0 for 4 in this one. He had very minimal contributions, positive, to say the least. And I'm actually a little bit worried that he just might not be like a playoff rotation level player anymore. And they're just trying to make that work because they're in desperate need of that. Speaking of that, Julian Strother had a couple of good floaters and a really tough layup where he fumbled the ball all the way down the floor, but ended up finishing it anyways. But he went 0 for 2 on his threes. Neither of them were bad shots and neither of them were bad misses, just the way it goes. Overall, Denver went 7 for 38 from outside, which is pitiful. Not only did they miss their threes, but a ton of them were fucking wide open. So many wide open threes for like Peyton Watson, Christian Brown, who fucking else on the floor. Basically anybody that wasn't Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, and Michael Porter Jr. got an open three-pointer and it didn't go in. Kind of a horrifying shooting night from them. This bench and the starting 2 spot is a level of awful that I do think it will stop this team from making it beyond the second round, let alone winning a title, especially if Jamal Murray is going to keep fucking around like this. MPJ also had a bunch of awful drives in this game, like so many where he just like threw some shit up. The moment he got an ounce of contact, he just took a wild shot, but not in a way that like was looking like he was trying to generate contact. Just stupid flailing. That's all I could really say about it. For the Oklahoma City Thunder, I have much more positive things to say because, man, they were good. And the first thing I have to say is about Aaron motherfucking Wiggins, because I just want it to be well stated on this program that I have my stock invested in this guy. 7 for 9 from the field, midi pull-ups, post fade, catch and shoot threes, attacking a mismatch with Dario Saric on the perimeter to drive by him. He is so good on offense. He is a big athletic forward with amazing shooting touch. Got a good floater, got a good mid-range game, got a good three. He's a good dunker. He's a good finisher. Not really much of a ball handler and playmaker, but in terms of everything else you could ask for offensively, he fits in perfectly, and he's no slouch defensively either. He might not be their fourth best player, but I think he might be their fourth best offensive player. Caruso, super impactful without putting up a point. That's kind of his MO. They had Isaiah Joe in the dunker spot a few times, which was really interesting. I don't know what that was about. On one possession, he hit a floater. On another possession, he took the ball out and took a step back midi. Ousmane Dieng went 2 for 3 on corner threes. He shot all of them with supreme confidence. I believed him when he took those threes, and they went in. So maybe he could be a guy for them as a backup 5. Chet had a lot of really good moments as a playmaker. He set up Dort in the dunker spot for an and one after slipping the screen. Just an excellent all-around game from Chet on both ends of the floor, just looking like a Swiss Army knife in every facet of the game. J-Dub struggled with his shot, not too much to add there. It's just a bad start. SGA had a couple of possessions where he fell asleep on defense. This is like the only real negative that I can highlight with them. The two main ones that were super egregious, he let Christian Brown get a wide open backdoor layup like he literally, like it was the Tony Snell meme with, is it Otto Porter? It's Otto Porter and Tony Snell. Who was the one who was looking? Was it Otto Porter who was looking at? Either way, it was that play. Gave Christian Brown an open open layup, and then he helped one pass away on Michael Porter Jr. in the most lazy way in the world, where it was like when in 2K I want to get an extra shot up, so I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to intentionally not play defense on this possession so they shoot quickly so I can get the ball back. Like that type of negligence. I'd give this game a B in the entertainment category. OKC's offense and depth was really fun to watch, but I can say the exact opposite for the Denver Nuggets. Brutal offense and some very real scrub minutes. Just the worst. I hated so much of watching Denver because it looks like an empire that never was falling before my eyes. Next, we have the Dallas Mavericks versus the San Antonio Spurs, with Dallas winning 120-109. First thing for Dallas, Klay looked right at home. Still took a couple of dumb shots, really two main ones that stick out in my mind. A mid-range shot he had no business taking, and a step-back 3 that he took because he missed a wide-open one just a second before that, and he was clearly frustrated, but 2 bad shots. Frankly, that is a improved ratio for him. Hit 6 3-pointers, got a few so open that Luka knew they were going in. One of them, he had time to take a fucking dribble. Luka and Kyrie were really strong defensively. That was a big thing I was watching out for. Not that the Spurs have the most impressive offensive approach on the perimeter, but they made a lot of strong plays. Kyrie ripped Julian Champagnie and forced a turnover on Jeremy Sohan. Luka broke up a lob to Wemby, which is not an easy thing to do. They were both really active and attentive on that end, so credit to him. Kyrie blew a couple of layups that he would normally hit. That's kind of the way it goes. Some first game shit. Him and Luka both shot 35-ish% from the field, so not the best offensive showing from them. Wemby's rim protection was present, as it always is, so it seemed like Dallas just decided, fuck it, we're going to shoot a bunch of 3-pointers and we're just going to hit all of them. They went 6 for 9 from outside in the fourth quarter and hit a bunch of them in a row, including 2 from Luka and 2 from Klay back-to-back. They also grabbed an impressive 17 offensive rebounds, which is really, really good. San Antonio, Wemby needs to work on his shot diet a little bit. Like, I'm not trying to be a boomer here, but can you roll to the basket? Can you get your big ass in the paint? I have no issue with his mid-range game. I like that. His mid-range release point is so hilarious and uncontestable. But like, just because you're 7'4" doesn't mean you need to shoot threes from a million feet away to like even things out. Like, chill with the deep threes. Let's get the regular threes to go in before we start taking the deep threes. That's really all that I ask. CP3 was kind of bad. He still got his assists, but it's feeling more and more forced, like it's just a player farming assists. That seems to be what I've got from him with Golden State last year. Same impression I got today, and it's just because his scoring gravity isn't the same. There was a play where Daniel Gafford interrupted a lob to Wemby, another instance where Wemby's lob was fucked up, and it was because he knew that Chris Paul's ass was not driving inside to shoot a layup. Chris Paul never drives inside for a layup. He was driving inside to set up Wemby, so Gafford was like, okay, I'm just going to wait for you to pass it because you're obviously not shooting the ball. That's what happens when you lose your scoring punch. That is the effect that scoring gravity has on playmaking, and unfortunately it's made Chris a far less devastating playmaker. My main takeaway for San Antonio, honestly in the positive direction, Julian Champagnie looked like he could be a legit long-term prospect for San Antonio. I'm not expecting him to be a star player or anything, but like legit role player. He reminds me of Alan Crabb before he was bad, but excellent three-point shot, multiple different angles, looks like he could potentially be a movement shooter, never makes bad decisions with the ball, and he's not a defensive liability by any means. Their rookie Stephon Castle had a few good moments, hit a mid-range pull-up, had a couple of nice dimes, I believe 5 assists on the game. Harrison Barnes scored 8 straight points at some point, so there was that. Entertainment-wise, I gave it a score of a B+. Clay in Dallas is fun. I'm getting over the fact that it's weird to see him in that jersey rather quickly. Wemby's misutilization was frustrating, both in terms of how San Antonio uses him, how it's historically annoying, but also in this case, there was a lot of things that Wemby was doing where I'm like, bro, clean up your act a little bit here. This is unnecessarily sloppy. Next up, we have the Portland Trail Blazers versus the Golden State Warriors, with the Warriors winning 140-104. For Golden State, this team looked like the Warriors of old. Ball movement, three-pointers, quick three-pointers at that, cutting, a team that plays for the team. A couple of different plays where like the roller was setting up a cutter. There was one where Andrew Wiggins drived inside and Kuminga cut right out of the corner just in time to get the dump-off pass. There was one where Trace Jackson-Davis on the roll hit a quick little shovel pass to Draymond Green in the dunker spot that was really nice. Just a lot of Warriors beautiful game type shit. Obviously that's the Spurs moniker, but that was something the Warriors offense was at least initially known for back when it was like Steph plus role players. And that's the kind of system I've wanted to see them return to. Instead, it's just been a Steph Curry job constantly. Wiggins looked like he was in his 2022 form. He hit his catch and shoot threes. He finished with 20 points, 4 for 7 from 3. Melton and especially fucking Buddy Hield also contributed to the shooting. Hield had 22 points in 14 minutes, hit 5 of his 7 threes. He also ran the floor really well on the break and got a bunch of easy layups out of it. Just smart offense over his first 2 games. This is because he also had a crazy high volume and low minute scoring game in game 2. He averages 50.4 points per 36. Welcome back, Wilt Chamberlain. Spacing does not look bad at all, which can't say that about last year's team. The ball moved well, and everyone attacked closeout super strong. Moses Moody had 15 points in 15 minutes. It's almost like you should fucking play him, Steve Kerr. But whatever. 20 for 48 from 3 overall, which is really good. And most importantly, the number one takeaway I would have from this all, Steph did not have to carry. 17 points, only shot it 10 times. That's what I'm fucking talking about. Steph also had a ton of strong defensive reads where it really seemed like he just anticipated what Portland was doing, like read the play ahead of time and got right in time for the passing lane. So a couple of surprisingly smart defensive plays from them. For the Portland Trail Blazers, there was no Shaedon Sharpe, which means I have no reason to watch this game because Shaedon Sharpe is easily my favorite player on this team. Scoot Henderson, unfortunately, did not look better than his rookie year. Not necessarily going to happen in the first game. Really inefficient. His jumper was mostly a non-threat. He did hit a step-back midi over Wiggins that looked pretty, but other than that, it looked like that shit was not going in every time he shot it. Donovan Clingan looks like he belongs in the NBA. Got a really nice swat on a loony layup out of the pick and roll where it looked like they were going at him because he was a rookie, and Clingan was like, nah, dude, I'm cleaning that up. I'm clinging that up. Maybe that's a thing. It's not. DeAndre Ayton was terrible. He airballed a mid-range shot, so that's cool. And Toumani Camara, that's someone who I didn't know a lot about from last year, but he looked really good as a versatile forward. Good defense, and he hit a pair of open catch-and-shoot threes. Like, kind of a well-rounded game from him. I would give this game a C+ on the entertainment front because it was fun to see a functional Warriors offense, but a lot of that probably also stemmed from a stinky Portland defense. So that kind of docked some points, and Portland really was no fun at all to watch on either end. I just missed Shaedon Sharpe the whole time. The next game we have is the Sacramento Kings versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, where Sacramento lost by 2 points, Minnesota scoring 117, them scoring 115. Now, you might be thinking Minnesota already played a game. That is true. However, this game for Sacramento is their first, so I am talking only about Sacramento. I had some notes about them, but this is a first game reaction, so I'm not allowed to tell you what I think of Minnesota in game 2. So let's talk about the Sacramento Kings. First things first, this pissed me off. There was little Keon Ellis, and I don't understand why. I'm cool with starting Herter. I understand that just from a spacing standpoint. I don't think it's the right move, especially because he shot 40% from 3 himself last year. And when he was in their starting lineup last year, they had the 3rd best defense in the entire league, which is saying a lot for this Sacramento Kings team. So to me, it seems like a no-brainer to start him. But I understand with the spacing concerns you have starting Herter, but to play him like 15 minutes, to play him less than Herter, to play him less than Malik Monk, I don't fuck with that at all. And they specifically closed with Malik Monk as the 5th guy in that lineup. I think if you're going to close with, obviously the core guys you're going to go with are Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, and DeMar DeRozan. Those 4 guys are going to be on the floor. Who is that 5th guy? Let me ask you, what do you need? Do you need shot creation? I would say no. Do you need floor spacing? I would say yes. Do you need defense? I would say yes. Malik Monk spaces the floor, but he's not a defender, and his primary contribution is as an offensive spark plug, as an offensive option to lead this team in some way. And to me, why is he on the floor? Let De'Aaron and DeMar do the on-ball creation, and then either have Herter shooting or Keon Ellis' shooting and excellent defense. Again, just choose Keon Ellis. Play Keon Ellis. That's my main thing. Monk did get a really nice and one in the clutch, so he did something. I'll give him that. It's not about what he's good at. It's just the utility of the lineup. Sabonis went 3 for 4 from 3. That's super interesting. Would be dope if he was a legit spacer. DeMar mostly fit in, although he had a couple of moments where it was like, yeesh, buddy, that was the best shot you could have taken, but that's kind of the way it goes with him. There were large stretches of complete and utter offensive droughts from Sacramento, which has me concerned, given that offense is their bread and butter, and I'm assuming a lot of this was stemming from the spacing issues. There were 4 straight minutes to close the third where they did not score the ball. They allowed an 11-0 run in the third quarter and a 9-0 run in the fourth quarter. That is ugly. That is bad. You can't be doing that. They seemed very unsure of their offense in the clutch, like who the ball was going to. Another thing that kind of ticked me off about the offense, same thing where it's like, how many guys do you want doing this thing at one time? Do we really want Keegan Murray taking a lot, like a high volume of mid-range shots? I get that you want to develop some of his creation ability, but between De'Aaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan, and Sabonis, who shoots them every once in a while to keep the defense honest, I don't think you need anybody else shooting mid-range shots, unless he's just absurdly good at them. Like, I would rather him just be a 3-point guy through and through, at least for now with his current role with this team. Maybe that is a little limiting, and I'm not saying offense is not a fucking computer where you just input, okay, this guy takes threes instead of mid-range shots, so I realize sometimes you have to take them. But what I'm saying is Murray and the flow of the Kings offense suggested to me that a Murray mid-range pull-up, a mid-range step back was like a shot they were very happy with. And to me, like, that's a end of the shot clock solution, not what your offense is looking for. Really, I don't think you should look for mid-range shots pretty much ever in your offense, and you just take them when you get them. But if you have a guy like DeMar and De'Aaron, I understand hunting for them. I don't understand hunting for them for anybody else. Take as few mid-range shots with people who aren't those 2 guys as possible, because those 2 guys alone are going to make you one of the highest volume mid-range shooting teams in the league. De'Aaron Fox did become more of a 3-point shooter and less of a mid-range shooter last year, so that's a little bit lean that way, but still, you really don't want an excess of mid-range shooting, I'm telling you. It's good that he can do it, don't get me wrong. I just don't think it should be a staple of the offense. Julius Randle fucking cooked in this game. This is the one thing I will tell you positive about them from that game, where he just could not miss, and that was pretty much because of the mismatches all the time. It was usually DeMar DeRozan. Every once in a while, they got Keegan Murray on him, and Keegan did a better job because he's a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, a little bit better, considerably better defensively, actually. But Julius still didn't have much problem with him. And that's another unfortunate thing with this team. We're like, okay, if you have Keegan Murray defending Anthony Edwards, what are you going to put on, like, if another team has, like, a forward you have to worry about? What is that matchup going to look like? Are you putting DeMar DeRozan Let's see, what's an example that I could think of? I'm trying to think of a team that has like a star guard and a star forward. I mean, like a star creator that you would want to put a bigger body on, because I was going to say like the Indiana Pacers or whatever. This is why fucking Keon Ellis should start, because this helps you avoid a lot of those problems. So just start Keon Ellis is my point. I give this game an A- in entertainment, plenty of good offense, and a close game is always good. All right, it is the next day because I did not actually have every single game covered at this point, and unfortunately I decided to go which game I wanted to watch in order pretty much. So that means we have a bunch of stinkers at the end here. We're doing Orlando Magic versus Miami Heat. This was a game that was interesting, but ultimately a massive blowout, so it wasn't something I was super looking forward to. Orlando won 116-97. First things first for the Miami Heat. Bam ended up shooting 2 3-pointers between him and Jimmy Butler. Both of them were fucking dreadful offensively. Jimmy went 1 for 8. Bam went 1 for 5. Defensively speaking, Bam Adebayo was also kind of, at least, not very good in this game, especially in the third quarter where it was very prominent how little rim protection Miami actually had. There were a lot of moments where Bam was just simply stepping up too much on the perimeter to a point that it gave Orlando a bunch of free openings. Offense for them just looked like it had no plan, like no hierarchy, no scheme. It was just like they were walking up the court and just figuring it out then like it's 2K and you're running freelance. Tyler Hero looked really solid and aggressive at the start and then just kind of disappeared as the game went along. Jaime Jaquez hit a pair of like ridiculously like difficult triples, one of them like fading out of the corner over I don't remember who it was, but it was a small guy. It might have been Cole Anthony. But he started to heat up when the game was already over, so it did not end up mattering. Nikola Jokic went 1 for 7 from outside, and pretty much only 1 or 2 of those shots were even contested to begin with, and ironically, the one that he made was pretty heavily contested, so that's pretty rough. Yeah, Jimmy and Bam, both negative 30s, both only hit 1 of their already small amount of shots, so not a good showing for the Heat. Franz and Paolo for the Orlando Magic were hitting their 3-pointers, Paolo going 4 for 8, Franz going 3 for 6, Franz even hitting a really difficult one in the face of Terry Rozier, I believe at the start of the fourth quarter. Orlando had a massive third quarter where they scored 39 points while holding Miami to just 18. They were getting to the paint at will. A prominent staple was Franz as a cutter. He got like 3 different buckets in that quarter just off of well-timed cuts. One of them was cutting back door as soon as Paolo was in the post doing a behind-the-back pass out of it that was just a gorgeous play. Even though Paolo did take a decent volume of 3-pointers, including a good amount of them being pull-ups, he was not taking these contested, dumb, forced mid-range shots that he was known for last year. Really, anytime he was inside the arc, he was using his body to get to the rim and just being a dominant force, which is something a lot of people were hoping to see from him, so it's a positive sign to start the year. Anthony Black ended up getting 28 minutes, and he looked like a real NBA player. Solid defense, good decision-making on offense, missed a point-blank putback layup, but other than that, I really have no complaints with the guy's game. He looked like he belonged, which you can't really say that a lot about how he played last year. KCP did not hit any of his shots, or at least any of his 3-pointers, but his defense was great. He's not really a high volume guy, so if he has a game where he goes like 0 for 3 or 0 for 4, it's really not the biggest deal in the world. And the offense in general looked really, really good. If Paolo and Franz are hitting their 3-pointers, the sky is kind of the limit for their offense. Last year, that was really capped by the fact that both of them had been really rough shooting the threes. Franz specifically, who shot just over 30 or maybe just under, I can't really remember perfectly, but one way or the other, awful offense because of that spacing issue, but their shooting was great in this game. And if that holds up, it doesn't have to be 50% from 3, but if like they're both respectable, strong, fairly high volume-ish 3-point shooters, everything else in their offense works pretty fucking flawlessly. So yeah, I would give this game a C+ in the entertainment category. Definitely not the best. Orlando was really fun to watch when they're normally a team that I don't actually enjoy watching all that much. But Miami was dreadful. It was extremely painful to watch them play, and I hated it. So they knocked a lot of points for, it wasn't Orlando's fault. This was Miami's fault that this game was not very fun. Next up, we have the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Philadelphia 76ers, with Milwaukee winning 124-109. 9. It is important to note that there was no Paul George or Joel Embiid in this game, so it makes it kind of difficult to evaluate Philadelphia other than the idea of like, okay, well, those guys are both injury prone. What are they going to look like when they're not playing? Well, turns out not all that good. Kelly Oubre and Tyrese Maxey were taking a large majority of the shots because there's really not that many offensive options on the floor for this team. They did manage to win the first quarter, which I'd say is more of a knock on Milwaukee than it is a success for Philadelphia. But after that, the game was pretty much Milwaukee's the whole way through. Caleb Martin and Kyle Lowry both looked really good off of the bench. Yabusele, who had some big moments in the Olympics last year, looked really good as a 3-and-D player. He hit a hilarious shot at the end of the second quarter where he was like at the free throw line, pump faked, guy kind of got to the side of him, then he leaned in and banked it in. It was just one of the ugliest buzzer-beating shots I've ever seen. They ran Kenyon Martin Jr. as a backup 5 a little bit alongside Yabusele, so that is interesting. Just two big, versatile forwards. I just imagine that's a product of the fact that there was no Embiid, but they have Andre Drummond as a backup 5, but I liked that idea. I hope that they explore doing that more. They looked pretty solid in that, especially considering the context of who they were playing. For the Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis had absolutely zero resistance getting to the rim in this game. As a result, he was devastatingly efficient. Damian Lillard had a 30-piece where he was extremely efficient, like I think in the 70s in true shooting. Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton were both really good off of the bench, especially Bobby Portis, who had 17 points on 7 for 10 shots. Taurean Prince was phenomenal, going 4 for 5 from 3 with 16 points. That is a player to watch out for Milwaukee, because if he actually ends up being a really effective 3-and-D player, then that's someone that you can confidently play 30-plus minutes a game, and they got the guy for like virtually the minimum. I saw a couple of Dame and Giannis pick and rolls, but I can't say that I'm super happy about the offensive approach that they had. I think that was a main reason why Philadelphia was kind of able to hang around in this game, despite the fact that they really had no business doing that. They got it to just 12 points about halfway through the fourth quarter, and Milwaukee had to close the games with their starters. If Tyrese Maxey is really the only guy you have to worry about, I would hope that if you're supposedly a contender, you can stomp this team out going into the fourth quarter. But that did not happen. They allowed them to hang with it, and they had to actually try late in this game, which is not ideal. This should be a game that you coast through, and they did not at all. Really not encouraged by that. And honestly, it was more frustrating that this game was as close as it was at some points. Like, don't get me wrong, it always looked like Milwaukee was going to win this one, but this should have been a game that I could have turned off like halfway through the third quarter. But alas, I had to keep watching Tyrese Maxey shoot the ball 30 times. I would give this one a C+ in the entertainment category. It's really hard to be invested in a game where one of the teams is missing their two most important players. Not to mention, kind of hard to watch a good team not do all that great against a bad one. And given how Milwaukee has proceeded to lose to the Nets and the Chicago Bulls since this game, looks like perhaps the Bucks might have fallen off, but that's a deeper topic for a future video you'll probably be getting soon, especially if they continue to stink it up. They are playing the Celtics at the day that I am recording this. Next, we have the Memphis Grizzlies versus the Utah Jazz. Memphis winning 126-124. Another game that was surprisingly close. To be fair, for Memphis, they were missing a lot of their key players. No Jaren Jackson, no Vince Williams Jr., or G.G. Jackson. All of those guys are like starting caliber 30-plus minute per game guys. So you're obviously stretching your rotation a little bit there. For the Utah Jazz, Walker Kessler looked excellent. 14 boards, 16.6 blocks, if I'm remembering correctly. A couple of good offensive rebounds. Lauri Markkanen was just fucking phenomenal this entire game. Looked like he could get whatever he wanted offensively. A couple of half-court lobs. The Jazz actually ran a good amount of half-court lobs. I think Walker Kessler got 2, Lauri Markkanen got 2 or 3, and John Collins got 1 or 2 of them as well. And all of these were lobs in the half-court set. Probably something that Jaren Jackson would do a good job of breaking up, but there wasn't really a lot of rim protection available. Cody Williams, their rookie, played 19 minutes, did not score the ball, didn't even shoot the ball a single time, got 4 rebounds and 4 fouls, also got stripped by Ja Morant pretty embarrassingly. Not a strong debut. Keontae George, he's like the number one player, like the most interesting player to me about this Utah Jazz team. He had a lot of moments last year. He kind of reminded me of and maybe this isn't a positive sign, but he did remind me of like rookie year Jordan Poole, where he was like, wow, this guy's awful, but if some of these shots start to drop in, he looks great, because it's like, it's not a matter of incompetence towards the ability to create a shot. It was just, as soon as the shot went up, it never actually went in. Hoping for a bounce back for Keyonte George on that front, but unfortunately he started the season going 3 for 18. Unfortunately, all 3 of the buckets he got were like tough as hell. He got a step back 3 that was really gorgeous, crazy and one finish layup, and then a floater as well through traffic. All of them just looked like, man, this guy's a bucket getter. But then if you look at the other 15 field goal attempts, like he didn't take a lot of bad shots, but they were not going in. Really efficient Colin Sexton game. There's not much else to say about the Jazz. It's the Jazz, kind of a hard team to evaluate, because what exactly are they even doing? Who really knows? For the Memphis Grizzlies, as I mentioned, missing a lot of key players, but they had Santi Aldama step up. He looked like fucking prime Danilo Gallinari, 27 points, 5 for 10 from outside. Very big forward with decent shooting touch, and if he could actually be a real piece for Memphis, that would be huge. Speaking of real pieces, especially one coming out of nowhere, Jay Huff, he just signed a 4-year contract. He had 13 points in this game, 3 for 5 from outside, and I'm talking like all 3 of those three-pointers looked like they were going to go in. All of them ripped the net, like confidently a strong three-point shooter here. Scottie Pippen Jr., their backup point guard, also looks to be a legitimate rotational piece. 7 assists in 22 minutes, 3 steals as well. Looked good with his own offense. Frankly, him, Jay Huff, like, these guys could be dudes who are like very legitimate rotational pieces, and they're getting them for really cheap and getting them seemingly out of nowhere, because these are not players that people were fighting over. The last thing, unfortunately, the loud thing with the Grizzlies this season right now is Zach Edey, and in his rookie debut game, he fouled out in 14 minutes. Not ideal. It's a rookie debut game. I'm not knocking him for it, but yeah. Overall, this was a really entertaining game because Utah's offense was running smoothly. Memphis tends to be a relatively fun team, so I think I'd give them a B+ as well. This didn't break out into the like really, really good territory, but it was chill. Next, we have the Boston Celtics versus the Washington Wizards. Obviously, the first game we covered was the Celtics, so we're just doing this for the Wizards. Obviously, the Wizards didn't do a good job defending the Celtics. That is what it is. Jordan Poole looked good. He was really efficient, or at least by his standard, like plus true shooting, which is not something he typically does. Alexander Sarr, 1 for 7 from the field, 0 for 5 from 3. I think somebody needs to tell this guy that three-point shooting is not the first priority with his game, that he needs to be doing more big man stuff, because he seems really intent on being a perimeter guy, and I just don't know if that's what's right for him. Bilal Coulibaly got to the free throw line a good amount of times. I think shot 8 free throws, had some really nice dimes. I would have liked to see him be a little bit more prominent in the offense, though. Kyle Kuzma was getting a bunch of shots, and them shits were not going in. Entertainment-wise, I'm going to give this an F. I fucking hate the Wizards. I don't want to watch them, but I had to. So, moving on. The Brooklyn Nets versus the Atlanta Hawks. Atlanta wins 120-116. This is another game I really had very little interest in watching. Not because of Atlanta, because Atlanta is actually kind of interesting. I don't give a shit about the Brooklyn Nets right now because they're going to be bad, very intentionally so. And yeah, they were. For Brooklyn, Ben Simmons, 6 turnovers, 5 fouls in 24 minutes, only scored either 6 or 8 points, got 8 assists. Not a strong return game. There's a lot of hype. I guess every year the hype gets a little bit less as it goes on. But of course, there's the natural cycle of like, is Ben Simmons going to be a guy now? Based on this game, no. He was bad. Hopefully he turns that around. Cam Thomas, 36 points on 27 shots. That's a lot of points, and it's actually relatively efficient for him. Again, that's kind of relative to who we're talking about here, but and he got his buckets the same way he always does. Mid-range pull-ups, floaters, had a couple of tough drives. Nicholas Claxton was on a minutes restriction, so we didn't see a lot of him, but he did play good when he was in. I was actually kind of surprised by how well Brooklyn's offense ran ultimately, because they got to 116 points, and it's not like Atlanta is like a completely bad defensive team by any stretch. So good on them on that front. For the Atlanta Hawks, I was disappointed by Jalen Johnson's game because he had 11 points with 6 turnovers. Trey looked like a vintage, heliocentric, I have the ball all the time Trey Young, so that was cool. Dyson Daniels was phenomenal, specifically on the offensive end. We already know the guy could play defense really well at an NBA level, but his offense is a little bit more questionable. I think he had 16-ish points, couple of really good cuts. Incredible, and I mean an incredible Onyeka Okongwu game. Fucking start him already, please, because he had 28 points on 11 for 12 shooting. He's better than Clint Capella at this point. Can we just stop this? This has gone on for like 2 years too long, arguably 3. Underwhelming debut for Zachary Risacher. The only memorable moment of the game for me was him getting swatted to hell by Nicholas Claxton. Shot 2 for 8 from the field, just played 19 minutes, and he did not start. I was trying to think, when's the last time that a number 1 overall pick did not start for his team in the opening night? Because I can't imagine that shit has happened. Like, Zion doesn't count because he got hurt. Like, I'm talking like dudes who were drafted and then played. Who's not starting that first game? I can't think of a time that happened. Not exactly positive for number 1 overall pick Zachary Risacher. I'll give this game a B+ because the Hawks were fun and Brooklyn was surprisingly competent offensively, like I said. So yeah, shout out to Nick for editing this video. Let me know what you thought of your team's first game, what you thought of my coverage here. I'm looking forward to covering some of these games a little bit more in depth because I won't have to do 17 of them in one video. But yeah, drop a like. This was a lot of fucking effort, so I would appreciate it. Check out the shoot around. That clip is up on the channel, will be one of the top links. That is it. Goodbye.